The rain hammered against the glass ceiling of Union Station as I stood there, soaked to the bone, clutching my phone with trembling fingers. The text message glowed mockingly on the screen. Change of plans. Taking Stephanie to Napa instead. You can catch the next train home. Sorry, babe. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 23 minutes. That's how long I waited on that platform before I finally accepted that Derek wasn't coming back. 23 minutes of watching couples embrace, families reunite, and business travelers hurry past while I stood there like a fool, holding 2 first-class tickets to San Francisco that were supposed to be our anniversary surprise. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent 3 months planning this weekend getaway, working extra hours as a marketing consultant to afford those premium tickets, researching the perfect boutique hotel in Nob Hill, even buying a new dress that still hung in our closet with the tags on. All for our 5th wedding anniversary. All to save a marriage that I was apparently the only one fighting for. I should have seen the signs earlier. The late nights at the office, the new cologne, the way Derek's phone had suddenly become off limits. But love, or maybe just stubborn hope, had made me blind to what everyone else probably saw clearly. My husband was having an affair with Stephanie Reed, the platinum blonde real estate photographer who worked in his office building. The train to San Francisco left without me. I watched it disappear into the Oregon drizzle, carrying my dreams of reconciliation along with it. Standing in that cavernous station, surrounded by the echoes of other people's journeys, I felt smaller than I had in years. My marriage was over. My savings account was nearly empty thanks to Derek's mysterious expenses. And I was stranded in downtown Portland with nowhere to go but back to our tiny apartment in Southeast. That's when my phone rang. Walter Kane's name appeared on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. Walter was Derek's elderly client, a retired tech executive who had been trying to sell his West Hills mansion for months. Derek had been handling the listing, though with little success. I couldn't imagine why Walter would be calling me directly. "Amanda, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling," Walter's gravelly voice carried through the phone. I tried Derek's number, but it went straight to voicemail. I was hoping you might know where he is. There's been a rather urgent development with the house sale. I closed my eyes, feeling fresh humiliation wash over me. Even Derek's clients were looking for him, and I had no idea where my own husband was. Well, I knew where he was. Somewhere in wine country with his mistress, probably toasting their secret romance with champagne that should have been celebrating our anniversary. "He's out of town," I managed, my voice cracking despite my efforts to sound professional. "Can I take a message for him?" There was a pause on the other end. Walter Kane had always struck me as perceptive during our brief interactions at real estate events. Derek had introduced us a few times, always with pride, back when he still seemed proud to have me as his wife. "Amanda, forgive me if I'm overstepping, but you sound distressed. Is everything all right?" The kindness in his voice nearly broke me. I hadn't heard genuine concern from anyone in weeks. Derek's dismissive attitude had become so normal that I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone actually care about my well-being. "I'm fine," I lied, wiping rain from my face. "Just caught in the weather downtown." "Downtown? At this hour on a Friday evening? My dear, that's no place to be stranded. Why don't you come by the house? I was just making some tea, and I could use the company. Besides, there are some matters regarding Derek's work that I think you should know about." Something in his tone made me pause. It wasn't just polite concern. There was an edge to his words, an implication that sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the October rain. "What kind of matters?" I asked. "The kind that are better discussed in person. Can you make it to West Hills? I'll send a car for you." I looked around the empty station, then at the soggy anniversary tickets still clutched in my hand. What did I have to lose? My marriage was clearly over, My evening was ruined, and I had nowhere else to go except back to an apartment that would smell like Derek's cologne and echo with the memory of his lies. "Okay," I said. "I'll come." The car Walter sent wasn't what I expected. Instead of a modest sedan, a sleek black town car pulled up to the station, the kind of vehicle that screamed old money and established wealth. The driver, a professional, woman in her 50s, greeted me by name and helped me into the leather interior without asking questions about my bedraggled appearance. As we wound through the hills above Portland, I tried to process what was happening. Walter Kane had always been polite during our brief encounters, but I knew very little about him beyond the fact that he was selling a mansion worth several $1,000,000. Derek had mentioned that Walter was some kind of tech pioneer who had cashed out before the dot-com crash, but Derek was often vague about his clients' backgrounds. The house, when we arrived, took my breath away. Perched on a hillside with panoramic views of the city below, it was the kind of home I'd only seen in architectural magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows, clean modern lines, and landscaping that looked like it belonged in a botanical garden. Even in the rain, it was stunning. Walter met me at the door, and I was struck by how different he seemed from the frail elderly man I remembered from real estate showings. Yes, he was in his 70s, with silver hair and lines around his eyes, but there was a sharpness to his gaze and a steadiness to his movements that suggested I had underestimated him. "Amanda, thank you for coming," he said, taking my damp coat. "You look like you could use something warm. Tea, or perhaps something stronger." "Tea would be wonderful," I replied, following him into a living room that could have housed my entire apartment. A fire crackled in a modern fireplace, and the city lights twinkled below us through the rain-streaked windows. Walter disappeared into what I assumed was the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the uncomfortable feeling that this evening was about to take another unexpected turn. When he returned with an elegant tea service, his expression had grown serious. "Amanda, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me," he said, settling into the chair across from mine. "How much do you know about Derek's real estate dealings?" The question caught me off guard. I know he's been working hard to sell your house. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He mentioned it's been challenging because of the market conditions. Walter's laugh was dry and humorless. Challenging. Yes, I suppose that's one way to put it. He poured tea into delicate china cups, his movements deliberate and precise. "Amanda, I'm going to tell you something that may be difficult to hear, but I believe you deserve to know the truth." My stomach clenched. After the evening I'd already had, I wasn't sure I could handle any more devastating revelations. But Walter continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Your husband has been stealing from me, systematically and deliberately, for months." The teacup rattled in my hands. "That's impossible. Derek wouldn't do that. He's always been honest in his business dealings." Walter reached for a folder on the coffee table and opened it, revealing a stack of documents. Bank statements, forged signatures, altered contracts. The evidence was laid out with methodical precision. 3 months ago, Derek convinced me to give him power of attorney for certain financial transactions related to the house sale, Walter explained. He said it would streamline the process, make things easier for an old man who didn't understand modern real estate practices. I trusted him. I stared at the papers, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Derek's signature appeared on documents authorizing transfers of tens of thousands of dollars, money that had supposedly gone to staging costs, marketing expenses, and property improvements, but had actually been diverted to accounts I didn't recognize. "But this doesn't make sense," I protested. "Why would he risk his career for money? We're not wealthy, but we're not desperate either." Walter's expression grew even more serious. "Amanda, when was the last time you checked your joint bank accounts?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't checked our finances in weeks, maybe months. Derek had always handled the money, claiming that his real estate background made him better suited for managing our investments and savings. I had trusted him completely. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and logged into our banking app. What I saw made the room spin around me. Our savings account, which should have contained nearly $15,000, showed a balance of $312. Our checking account was overdrawn. Credit cards I didn't even know existed were maxed out to their limits. "He's bankrupted us," I whispered, the phone slipping from my numb fingers. Walter leaned forward, his voice kind but urgent. "Amanda, I'm afraid it's worse than that. The money Derek stole from me, it wasn't just for his personal use. I have reason to believe he's been financing another life entirely. A life with someone else." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The expensive restaurants Derek claimed were business dinners. The weekend trips he said were real estate conferences. The designer clothes that had appeared in our closet, too small for me but perfect for someone else, someone like Stephanie Reed. "You knew about her," I said, not really asking. Walter nodded grimly. "I hired a private investigator weeks ago when I started noticing discrepancies in my accounts. The investigation revealed quite a lot about your husband's extracurricular activities, including the fact that he's been telling Ms. Reed that he's separated from you and planning to file for divorce. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't just that Derek was having an affair. He had been systematically destroying our life together while building a new one with someone else, using stolen money to fund his deception. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, tears finally spilling over. "Why not just go to the police?" Walter was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those sharp blue eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested he was about to offer me something far more significant than sympathy. "Because, my dear Amanda, I believe in justice. And I believe that sometimes justice requires a more creative approach than simply involving the authorities." He reached for another folder, this one thicker than the first. "You see, Derek made a crucial mistake when he decided to steal from me. He assumed I was just another elderly victim, too trusting and too frail to fight back." Walter opened the second folder, revealing photographs, financial records, and what appeared to be surveillance reports. The scope of the documentation was breathtaking. "I've spent 40 years in tech, Amanda. I built my fortune by being smarter than my competitors and more ruthless than they expected. Derek has been playing checkers while I've been playing chess." His smile was sharp and entirely without warmth. "The question is, do you want to be a pawn in his game? Or would you prefer to help me teach him what happens when someone underestimates Walter Kane?" I looked at this man I had barely known an hour ago, offering me an alliance I couldn't yet understand. Outside, the rain continued to fall on the city below, washing away the remnants of the life I thought I knew. In that moment, sitting in Walter's elegant living room with the evidence of my husband's crimes spread before me, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and humiliation were still there, but underneath them, something harder was taking shape. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. Walter's smile grew wider, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he looked genuinely pleased. "Well, my dear, that depends entirely on how committed you are to making sure Derek faces the consequences of his choices." He reached for a leather portfolio and pulled out what appeared to be legal documents. "You see, Derek doesn't know that I've already reported the theft to the authorities. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has been building a case for weeks. But criminal prosecution is slow, and it doesn't address the personal damage he's done to you." I stared at the official-looking papers, my heart pounding. "You're talking about revenge." "I'm talking about justice," Walter corrected. "There's a difference. Revenge is emotional and short-sighted. Justice is strategic and thorough." He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease despite the gravity of what he was suggesting. "Derek and his girlfriend are currently enjoying what they think is a romantic weekend getaway. paid for with money he stole from both of us. They have no idea that their entire world is about to come crashing down. But what can we actually do? The legal system will handle the theft charges, but that doesn't help with the humiliation, the destroyed marriage, the fact that I'm now financially ruined. Walter's eyes gleamed with something that might have been anticipation. Amanda, you're thinking too small. Derek's crimes go far beyond simple theft. He's committed fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and breach of fiduciary duty. But more importantly, he's made enemies of two people who have absolutely nothing left to lose. He stood up and walked to the wall of windows, looking out at the glittering city below. Your husband is a small-time con artist who got greedy. He saw a lonely old man with money and a trusting wife with access to joint accounts, and he thought he could take what he wanted without consequences. He was wrong. I still don't understand what you're proposing, I said, though part of me was beginning to suspect that Walter Kane was far more dangerous than he appeared. Walter turned back to me, and his expression was entirely serious. I'm proposing that we give Derek exactly what he deserves. Not just legal consequences, but personal ones. I'm proposing that we make sure he loses everything he cares about. Everything he's stolen and everything he thinks he's gained. He returned to his chair and pulled out his phone, scrolling through what appeared to be a series of photographs. Derek and Stephanie are currently at the Auberge du Soleil in Napa Valley. $700 a night, charged to a credit card. That's linked to an account he created using funds he embezzled from me. They're planning to spend the weekend planning their future together. Walter showed me the photos, clearly taken by a professional investigator. Derek and Stephanie laughing. Over dinner, holding hands as they walked through vineyards, sharing a kiss on a hotel balcony. The intimacy in the images was like a knife to my chest, but underneath the pain, anger was building. They think they're untouchable, I said quietly. They are about to learn otherwise, Walter replied. The question is, Amanda, are you ready? To stop being a victim and start being a player in this game? I looked at the evidence spread across the coffee table, at the photos of my husband with another woman, at the bank statements showing our demolished finances. I thought about standing alone in Union Station, abandoned and humiliated, while Derek celebrated his betrayal with stolen money. What would you need me to do? I asked. Walter's smile was sharp and satisfied. First, we're going to make sure Derek's crimes are exposed in the most public and humiliating way possible. Then, we're going to ensure that his new relationship doesn't survive the scrutiny that's coming. And finally, we're going to make sure you're not just financially whole, again, but significantly better off than you were before. He reached for a business card and slid it across the table. Tomorrow is Saturday. Derek and Stephanie will be returning from Napa on Sunday evening, expecting to continue their deception. But by Sunday night, their world will be completely different. I picked up the card. It was heavy stock, expensive printing, with just a name and phone number. Charles Brennan, attorney at law. Charles is going to help us with the legal aspects of what we're planning, Walter explained. But the real work, the creative work, that's going to be up to us. You still haven't told me exactly what we're going to do, I pointed out. Walter leaned forward, his eyes bright with anticipation. We're going to orchestrate Derek's complete downfall. Professional, personal, and financial. And we're going to do it in a way that ensures he never recovers from the damage he's caused. The rain had stopped while we were talking, and the Baum Dorf city lights below sparkled clearly through the windows. I felt a strange sense of clarity settling over me, as if the storm outside had somehow washed away my confusion and left behind something harder and more focused. When do we start? I asked. Walter stood up and extended his hand to me. My dear Amanda, we already have. Saturday morning arrived with crisp autumn sunshine streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Walter's guest suite. I had slept, better than I had in months, which seemed impossible given the circumstances. Perhaps it was the Egyptian cotton sheets, or maybe it was the first time in years that I felt like someone was genuinely on my side. Walter had insisted I stay the night rather than return to the apartment I shared with Derek. The guest room was larger than our entire living space, complete with an ensuite bathroom that felt like a luxury spa. But more than the physical comfort, there was something profoundly reassuring about being in a space where Derek had never been, surrounded by Walter's quiet confidence and strategic mind. I found Walter in his study at 8 in the morning, already dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, surrounded by multiple computer screens and stacks of documents. He looked up when I entered, offering me a warm smile that transformed his entire face. "Good morning, Amanda. I trust you slept well?" He gestured to a coffee service set up on a side table. I took the liberty of ordering some breakfast. We have a busy day ahead of us. As I poured myself coffee from what was clearly an expensive Italian espresso machine, Walter began outlining our strategy. His approach was methodical, almost clinical in its precision. "Derek's weakness is his arrogance," Walter began, pulling up what appeared to be a detailed timeline on one of his monitors. "He genuinely believes he's smarter than everyone around him. That blindness is going to be his downfall." The timeline showed Derek's activities over the past 6 months, documented with the thoroughness of a federal investigation. Meeting locations, financial transactions, communications with Stephanie, even photographs of them together at various restaurants and hotels throughout Portland and beyond. "How did you gather all this information?" I asked, amazed by the scope of the documentation. Walter's smile was enigmatic. "When you've spent 4 decades in tech, you learn that information is power. I have contacts in many industries, and Derek hasn't been as careful as he thinks." He clicked to another screen. "For instance, did you know that he's been telling Stephanie that you two are already divorced? He's shown her forged papers indicating that your marriage was dissolved 3 months ago." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't enough for Derek to cheat and steal. He had to erase me entirely from his narrative, rewriting our history to make his affair seem legitimate. "She has no idea she's sleeping with a married man," I said quietly. "None whatsoever. In fact, according to my sources, Derek has proposed to her. They're planning to announce their engagement when they return from Napa." Walter's expression grew serious. "Which brings us to the first phase of our operation." He pulled out his phone and showed me a series of social media posts from Stephanie's Instagram account. Photos of champagne glasses, vineyard views, and romantic dinners, all tagged with location markers and timestamps. Derek appeared in several of the images, though Stephanie had been careful not to tag him directly. "Public documentation of adultery and fraud," Walter noted with satisfaction. "They're creating evidence against themselves with every post, but we're going to help them create even more." Walter explained that his private investigator, a former FBI agent named Patricia, was currently in Napa Valley documenting Derek and Stephanie's activities. But more than just gathering evidence, she was strategically positioning herself to capture specific moments that would be crucial for our plan. "At 3 o'clock this afternoon, Derek is scheduled to meet with a potential investor about a development project in Southeast Portland," Walter continued. "Except the investor doesn't exist. Patricia set up the meeting using a false identity, and Derek took the bait immediately." I stared at Walter, beginning to understand the sophistication of what he was orchestrating. "You're manipulating his schedule." "I'm giving him opportunities to reveal his true character," Walter corrected. "The meeting is at a restaurant in downtown Napa, very public, very visible. Patricia will be there with recording equipment, documenting Derek's willingness to defraud yet another victim." Walter showed me the fabricated investor profile that had been used to lure Derek into the meeting. A supposedly wealthy widow looking to invest in Oregon real estate, complete with financial statements and references that would check out under casual inspection. "Derek's greed will do the rest," Walter said, He'll pitch her on fake properties, inflate prices, promise returns that don't exist, all while his supposed fiancée waits back at their romantic hotel, posting pictures of their stolen weekend on social media. The plan was diabolical in its elegance. Derek would be simultaneously documenting his adultery on social media while attempting to commit additional fraud, all under the watchful eye of a professional investigator. What happens when he realizes the investor is fake? I asked. Walter's smile was sharp. He won't, at least not until it's too late. Patricia is very good at her job. She'll string him along just enough to get what we need, then disappear. Derek will think he's found another victim, but he'll actually be providing us with evidence of criminal intent. While Derek was being manipulated in Napa, Walter and I had our own tasks in Portland. Our first stop was Charles Brennan's law office located in a gleaming tower in the Pearl District. Charles turned out to be a man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of quiet authority that suggested he was accustomed to handling complex, high-stakes cases. Walter has explained the situation, Charles said as we settled into his conference room. I've reviewed the evidence of embezzlement, and frankly, Derek Hayes is looking at serious federal charges, but I understand you want to pursue additional remedies. Charles spread out a series of legal documents across the mahogany table. Divorce papers, asset protection filings, and what appeared to be the framework for a civil lawsuit. The criminal case will take months, possibly years to resolve, Charles explained. During that time, Derek will likely attempt to hide assets, destroy evidence, and manipulate the narrative. We need to move quickly to protect Amanda's interests and ensure Derek can't cause additional damage. The first document was a petition for immediate separation and asset freezing. Once filed, it would prevent Derek from accessing joint accounts, selling shared property, or making any major financial decisions without court approval. But won't this tip him off that I know what he's been doing? I asked. Charles exchanged a glance with Walter. Not if we time it correctly. Walter has suggested we file these papers on Monday morning, immediately after Derek returns from his romantic weekend. The timing will create maximum impact and confusion. Walter leaned forward, his expression intent. By Monday morning, Derek will be dealing with multiple crises simultaneously. The FBI will be executing search warrants on his office and home. His affair will be publicly exposed. His business relationships will be in ruins. And he'll discover that his wife has not only divorced him, but taken steps to recover every stolen dollar. The scope of the coordinated attack was breathtaking. Derek would go from thinking he had successfully orchestrated his escape from R.E. marriage to facing complete personal and professional destruction, all in the span of a few hours. There's one more element, Walter said, his tone suggesting he had saved the best for last. I've taken the liberty of purchasing Derek's debts. I looked at him blankly. What does that mean? Charles answered, consulting his notes. Your husband has been financing his lifestyle with credit cards, personal loans, and lines of credit. The total debt exceeds $80,000, much of it secured against future commissions and business income that he's unlikely to earn, once his criminal activities are exposed. Walter's smile was predatory. I bought those debts from the original creditors at a discount, perfectly legal, and it gives me the right to call them due immediately. Derek will owe me personally for every dollar he's borrowed, with interest and penalties. The elegance of the strategy was stunning. Derek had stolen from Walter and bankrupted me, but Walter's response was to legally acquire control over Derek's financial obligations, effectively owning him. Won't he just declare bankruptcy? I asked. Bankruptcy doesn't discharge debts incurred through fraud, Charles replied. And given the criminal charges he'll be facing, no bankruptcy court will give him a fresh start. He'll be financially ruined for decades. After leaving Charles's office, Walter and I drove to Southeast Portland, to the modest apartment Derek and I had shared for 3 years. Walking through those rooms with Walter felt surreal, seeing our life together through the eyes of someone who understood exactly how Derek had been manipulating me. "He's been conditioning you for years," Walter observed, noting the expensive electronics that Derek claimed were necessary for his business, contrasted with the secondhand furniture and my outdated laptop. "Classic financial abuse. He spends freely on himself while convincing you that frugality is a virtue." In Derek's home office, we found additional evidence of his deception. Business cards for companies that didn't exist, contracts for properties that were never for sale, and a second phone that I had never seen before. Walter photographed everything while I felt like I was discovering the true extent of my husband's double life. The second phone contained text messages between Derek and Stephanie dating back 8 months. As I scrolled through their conversations, the depth of Derek's lies became clear. He had told Stephanie that I was mentally ill, that our marriage had been over for years, that he was only staying with me out of pity while he arranged for my care. "He's been poisoning her against you from the beginning," Walter noted, reading, over my shoulder. "Making you the obstacle to their happiness rather than acknowledging his own betrayal." But the most damaging messages were the recent ones, sent from Napa Valley. Derek describing his plans to clean out our joint accounts. Before filing for divorce, his excitement about starting fresh with Stephanie, and his casual dismissal of my feelings and future. "He's texting about this while she posts pictures of their romantic dinner," I said, showing Walter the timestamps. "She has no idea he's planning to destroy his wife financially." Walter nodded grimly. "Stephanie Reed is going to be very surprised when she learns the truth about her Prince Charming." We spent the afternoon preparing what Walter called the reveal packages, comprehensive dossiers that would be delivered to key people in Derek's life at precisely the right moment. His business partners would receive evidence of his fraudulent activities. His family would get documentation of his affair and criminal behavior. Stephanie's friends and co-workers would learn that she was sleeping with a married man who had been lying to her from day one. "Public exposure is often more devastating than legal consequences," Walter explained as we organized the materials. "Derek's built his life on deception and charm. Once people see who he really is, those relationships will never recover." The most important package was being prepared for Stephanie herself. Walter had Patricia compile not just evidence of Derek's crimes, but proof of his lies about our marriage, his financial situation, and his real intentions toward her. "She deserves to know the truth," Walter said. "Derek has been using her just as much as he's been using you. The difference is that she still has time to escape before he destroys her life too." As evening approached, Walter received a call from Patricia in Napa Valley. Derek had taken the bait completely, spending 2 hours trying to defraud the fake investor while Patricia recorded every word. He had claimed ownership of properties he didn't control, inflated values by hundreds of thousands of dollars, and promised guaranteed returns that were physically impossible. He also revealed information about other potential victims, Patricia reported through the speakerphone. "He's been targeting elderly clients systematically, using the same power of attorney scam he tried on Walter." The recording would be turned over to the FBI on Monday morning, adding multiple counts of attempted fraud to Derek's growing list of criminal charges. But more immediately, it would be part of the evidence package that would destroy his reputation in the Portland real estate community. "How did Stephanie react when he was gone for so long?" I asked. Patricia's laugh was dry. "She spent the afternoon at the hotel spa, posting selfies and talking to her friends about wedding plans. She's completely oblivious to what Derek was actually doing." Walter and I spent Saturday evening reviewing our timeline for Monday's coordinated assault on Derek's carefully constructed lies. The FBI raids would begin at 7 in the morning. The divorce papers would be filed at 8. The evidence packages would be delivered throughout the day to Derek's business associates, family members, and social circle. But the centerpiece of our plan was still to come. Walter had arranged something he called the grand finale, though he was being mysteriously vague about the details. "Derek thinks he's coming home to continue his deception," Walter said as we sat in his study, reviewing the final preparations. "He has no idea that by Sunday evening, his entire world will have collapsed. But we're going to give him one last surprise." "What kind of surprise?" I asked. Walter's smile was enigmatic. "Let's just say that Derek's about to learn that actions have consequences, and some consequences are more creative than others." Sunday morning brought news that Derek and Stephanie were extending their stay in Napa by one day. According to Patricia's surveillance, they had decided to drive down the coast to San Francisco for a romantic dinner before returning to Portland on Monday. "Perfect," Walter said when he received the update. "The extra time will allow us to make some final preparations." Those preparations, it turned out, involved a trip to Portland International Airport and a meeting with a charter flight company that Walter apparently did business with regularly. The pilot, a professional woman named Captain Martinez, greeted Walter like an old friend. "The usual aircraft, Mr. Kane?" she asked, consulting her schedule. "Actually, something a bit more impressive today," Walter replied. "We'll need the Gulfstream, and I want to make sure it's positioned exactly where we discussed." As we toured the sleek private jet, I began to understand what Walter had been planning. The aircraft was magnificent, all leather seating and polished wood with the kind of luxury appointments that spoke of serious wealth. "Walter, this is too much," I protested. "I can't afford anything like this." "You're not paying for it," Walter replied calmly. "This is my gift to you. Consider it an investment in justice." Captain Martinez explained the flight plan while her crew prepared the aircraft. We would depart Portland on Monday evening, flying to San Francisco to arrive at precisely the moment Derek and Stephanie were scheduled to land at SFO from their drive down the coast. "The timing has to be perfect," Walter emphasized. "Derek needs to see you stepping off this jet at exactly the moment he realizes his world has fallen apart." Sunday evening brought final confirmations from all our various accomplices. Charles had the divorce papers ready for filing. Patricia had documented Derek's entire weekend of infidelity and attempted fraud. The FBI had confirmed they would execute search warrants first thing Monday morning. "Are you ready for this?" Walter asked as we reviewed the timeline one last time. I thought about Derek's text message abandoning me at Union Station, about the empty bank accounts and forged documents, about the months of lies and manipulation. I thought about Stephanie's Instagram posts celebrating their stolen weekend while I had stood alone in the rain. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I said. Walter nodded with satisfaction. "Then let's give Derek Hayes a Monday he'll never forget." The morning would bring chaos and consequences in equal measure. Derek's carefully constructed house of lies was about to collapse, and this time, I wouldn't be the one left standing in the wreckage. This time, I would be the one walking away. With dignity, justice, and the satisfaction of knowing that some betrayals carry a price that can never be fully paid. But first, Derek would have to face the music, and Walter Kane had composed quite a symphony of consequences for him to dance to. Monday morning dawned gray and drizzly, the kind of Pacific Northwest weather that seemed to mirror the storm about to break over Derek's unsuspecting head. I woke at 5:30, not from any alarm but from the electric anticipation coursing through my veins. Today was the day everything changed. Walter was already awake when I found him in his kitchen, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. He was preparing what appeared to be a full English breakfast, moving with the calm precision of someone who had orchestrated corporate takeovers and understood the value of maintaining energy during crucial operations. "Nervous?" he asked, noting my restless energy as I accepted a cup of perfectly brewed coffee. "Terrified," I admitted, "but also excited." "Is that wrong?" Walter's smile was understanding. "Anticipation of justice isn't wrong, Amanda. What would be wrong is allowing Derek to continue destroying lives without consequences. He checked his watch, a vintage Rolex that had probably been worth more than Derek's annual income. The FBI team should be arriving at Derek's office in approximately 90 minutes. The precision of the timing still amazed me. Walter had coordinated with federal agents, attorneys, private investigators, and various other professionals to ensure that Derek's day would unfold with devastating efficiency. Every element had been planned to create maximum impact and prevent any possibility of Derek escaping consequences through his usual charm and manipulation. At exactly 7:15, Walter's secure phone buzzed with a text from Special Agent Rebecca Torres, the FBI investigator handling Derek's case. Warrants executed. Subject not present at office location. Proceeding to residential address. I felt a moment of panic. What if he's already back from San Francisco? What if he's at our apartment right now? Walter remained calm. Patricia, confirmed their location an hour ago. They're still in their hotel in Union Square, probably having room service breakfast and planning their romantic drive up the coast. Derek has no idea what's waiting for him. The next update came at 7:45. The FBI had entered our apartment with a search warrant, accompanied by a locksmith and a forensic accountant. They would spend the day cataloging evidence, while Derek remained blissfully unaware in San Francisco, probably discussing wedding venues with Stephanie over mimosas. Phase 1 complete, Walter announced with satisfaction. Now for Phase 2. Phase 2 involved Charles Brennan filing divorce papers, along with emergency motions to freeze all marital assets and secure temporary restraining orders. The legal documents had been crafted with surgical precision, citing not just Derek's adultery, but his criminal activities, financial fraud, and emotional abuse. The beauty of filing today is that Derek can't respond until he's back in Portland and aware of the charges, Charles explained when he called to confirm the filings. By then, the asset freezes will already be in effect, and his access to funds will be completely cut off. Walter had thought of everything. Derek's credit cards would be canceled, his bank accounts frozen, and his access to any marital property suspended. When he tried to pay for his romantic dinner in San Francisco tonight, he would discover that his financial world had evaporated. The morning proceeded with military-like precision. At 9 o'clock, the first of our evidence packages was delivered to Derek's business partner, Marcus Webb, at Webb & Associates Real Estate. The package contained documentation of Derek's embezzlement, his forged power of attorney documents, and recordings of his attempts to defraud Walter. Marcus's reaction, according to Walter's contact at the real estate firm, was immediate and decisive. Derek was terminated via email, his access to company systems revoked, and his pending commissions forfeited. More importantly, Marcus immediately contacted the Oregon Real Estate Commission to report Derek's criminal activities, which would result in the permanent revocation of his license. One career destroyed, Walter noted with grim satisfaction as we received the update. At 10:30, similar packages were delivered to Derek's family members. His parents, who had always treated me with polite but distant courtesy, received comprehensive evidence of their son's adultery and criminal behavior. His sister Patricia, who worked in banking and had occasionally helped with Derek's business ventures, learned that she might be called as a witness in the federal fraud case. The reactions were swift and unforgiving. Derek's mother called our apartment, reaching only the FBI agents who were still processing evidence. His father sent an email to Derek's business account, which had already been suspended, expressing his shame and disappointment. Patricia immediately contacted her own attorney to ensure she wouldn't be implicated in her brother's crimes. Family. Relationship severed, Walter observed as we monitored the responses. Derek's support network is crumbling by the hour. But the most crucial delivery was happening in San Francisco, where Patricia, our private investigator, had finally arranged to meet Stephanie Reed face-to-face. The meeting was scheduled for 11 o'clock at a coffee shop near Stephanie's hotel, ostensibly to discuss a photography project for one of Patricia's fictional clients. Walter and I waited anxiously for Patricia's report. Everything depended on Stephanie's reaction to learning the truth about Derek. If she chose to stand by him despite the evidence, Derek would still have one ally. But if she realized she had been deceived and manipulated, Derek would face his downfall completely alone. The call came at 11:45. Patricia's voice was professionally neutral, but I could hear satisfaction underneath her clinical tone. Mission accomplished. Subject was initially defensive but became increasingly distressed as evidence was presented. She's currently in her hotel room, making phone calls and packing her belongings. Did she believe the evidence? Asked. She demanded to call Derek immediately to confront him about the lies. I advised her that might not be wise, given that he's about to be arrested on federal charges. That's when the reality really hit her. Patricia explained that Stephanie's reaction had been a mixture of horror, embarrassment, and genuine anger. The woman Derek had been courting with stolen money and false promises was not the calculating mistress I had imagined, but another victim of his manipulation. She had no idea he was still married, Patricia reported. He showed her forged divorce papers months ago. She's been planning their wedding, believing she was engaged to a successful real estate entrepreneur, not a criminal who was bankrupting his actual wife. Walter leaned back in his chair, looking pleased. Derek's romantic weekend is about to become very unromantic. The next update confirmed Patricia's assessment. Stephanie had indeed confronted Derek, probably around noon as they were preparing to check out of their hotel. According to surveillance, their conversation in the hotel lobby had been brief, but explosive. Stephanie had stormed out, leaving Derek standing alone with their luggage and a growing sense that something was terribly wrong. Derek's first instinct was apparently to call his office, only to discover that his business phone had been disconnected. His attempt to reach Marcus Webb went straight to voicemail. When he tried to access his company email from his personal phone, he found his account suspended. He's starting to panic, Walter observed as we tracked Derek's increasingly frantic attempts to reach his contacts in Portland. But he still doesn't understand the scope of what's happening. Derek's panic became full-blown crisis when he tried to pay for an early checkout from their expensive hotel. His primary credit card was declined. His backup card was also declined. When he tried to access his bank account through his phone, he discovered that all his accounts had been frozen by court order. "This is where it gets interesting," Walter said, checking his watch. Derek is now stranded in San Francisco with no money, no credit, and no idea why his life is falling apart. He's going to have to call someone for help. That someone turned out to be his sister Patricia, who was still reeling from the evidence package she had received that morning. According to Walter's contact who was monitoring Derek's communications, the conversation was brief and brutal. Patricia informed Derek that she knew about his crimes, that the FBI was searching his apartment, and that she would not be providing any assistance to a brother who had brought shame on their family. Derek's next call was to his parents, with similar results. His mother, who had spent years bragging about her successful real estate agent's son, was too devastated and angry to offer help. His father was more direct, telling Derek not to contact the family again until he had made amends for his criminal behavior. Complete social isolation achieved, Walter noted as we received updates on Derek's increasingly desperate attempts to find allies. No family support, no business relationships, no romantic partner, and no financial resources. Derek Hayes is now truly alone with the consequences of his choices. But Walter wasn't finished. The afternoon brought what he called the public education phase of our operation. Evidence packages were delivered to Derek's social circle, his former clients, and his professional associations. Within hours, Derek's criminality was common knowledge throughout Portland's real estate community. The Oregon Real Estate Commission issued an emergency suspension of Derek's license pending investigation. 3 former clients filed complaints, alleging fraud and misrepresentation. The Better Business Bureau received multiple reports documenting Derek's unethical practices. By 3 o'clock, Derek Hayes was professionally radioactive in every industry where he might hope to work. Social media is particularly unforgiving, Walter observed as we monitored the online reaction to Derek's exposure. Several people had shared screenshots of Stephanie's Instagram posts from the weekend, contrasting her romantic photos with the news of Derek's criminal charges. The comments were savage and spreading rapidly. Derek's attempts to manage the crisis from San Francisco were pathetic and increasingly desperate. He tried posting his own social media statements claiming innocence and blaming unspecified enemies for a conspiracy against him. The posts received immediate pushback from people who had seen the evidence, including screenshots of his own text messages planning to defraud additional victims. "He's making it worse for himself," I observed as Derek's online presence became a liability rather than an asset. "Narcissists always do," Walter replied. "They can't accept responsibility, so they keep digging the hole deeper." By 4 o'clock, Derek had apparently accepted that he needed to return to Portland immediately to manage the crisis. Patricia reported that he had purchased a bus ticket using cash he probably borrowed from other hotel guests, since his credit cards remained useless. The bus would take 8 hours, arriving in Portland around midnight. "Perfect timing," Walter said with satisfaction. "Derek will spend the entire trip wondering what he's going to face when he gets home, but he won't be able to do anything about it." Walter and I spent the late afternoon making our own final preparations. Our flight to San Francisco was scheduled to depart at 6 o'clock, time to arrive just as Derek's bus was pulling into the Portland terminal. But first, we had one more stop to make. The storage unit Derek had rented under a false name contained the evidence of his most personal betrayals. Wedding rings he had purchased for Stephanie using stolen money, expensive jewelry and clothing bought for his mistress while telling me we couldn't afford basic necessities, photo albums documenting their relationship while he was still pretending to work on our marriage. "He was building an entire alternate life," I said, looking at the contents of Derek's secret storage unit. "Planning to disappear from our marriage and emerge as someone completely different." Walter nodded grimly. "Men like Derek don't just cheat or steal. They create elaborate fantasies where they're the hero of their own story, and everyone else is expendable." We photographed everything in the storage unit, adding the images to our evidence files. But Walter had a special plan for the engagement ring Derek had bought for Stephanie, a gaudy 3-carat diamond that had cost more than most people's annual salary. "This particular item is going to play a starring role in tonight's performance," Walter said, carefully placing the ring in a velvet box. As we drove to Portland International Airport, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. The day had been a stunning success in terms of dismantling Derek's life and exposing his crimes. Justice was being served with mathematical precision. But underneath the satisfaction, I felt something else, a kind of melancholy for the life I had thought we were building together. "Second thoughts?" Walter asked, noticing my quiet mood. "Not about what we're doing," I said. "But I keep thinking about the woman I was Friday night, standing in Union Station, still believing that Derek and I had a future together. She seems like a different person now." Walter's expression was understanding. "Betrayal changes us, Amanda. The question is whether it makes us bitter and smaller, or stronger and wiser. You've chosen strength and wisdom." The private jet was waiting for us at the charter terminal, gleaming under the airport lights like something from a movie. Captain Martinez greeted us with professional warmth, confirming that everything was prepared for our flight to San Francisco. "The timing is critical," Walter reminded her as we boarded. "We need to arrive at SFO at exactly 11:35. "Understood, Mr. Kane. We'll have you on the ground with 5 minutes to spare." As the Gulf Stream lifted off from Portland, I looked down at the city lights below and thought about Derek, probably sitting on a Greyhound bus at that very moment, desperately trying to understand how his carefully constructed world had collapsed in a single day. He had no idea that the worst was yet to come. Walter opened a bottle of champagne as we reached cruising altitude. pouring 2 glasses of Dom Perignon that probably cost more than Derek's bus ticket. "To justice," he said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," I replied. Below us, the lights of the Pacific coast stretched endlessly toward San Francisco, where Derek Hayes was about to receive the final lesson in consequences that Walter Kane had so carefully orchestrated. The man who had abandoned me at a train station was about to discover what it felt like to be truly abandoned, with nowhere to run and no one to save him from the reckoning he had earned. The flight to San Francisco gave Walter time to explain the final details of what he called the crescendo. Derek would arrive at Portland's bus station to find FBI agents waiting with arrest warrants. But before that happened, he would witness something that would make it clear that his victims had not only survived his betrayal, but thrived because of it. "The private jet isn't just about luxury," Walter explained as we descended toward San Francisco Bay. "It's about power. Derek needs to see that while he was playing small-time con games, he was dealing with people who operate on a completely different level." Captain Martinez announced our final approach to SFO, and through the windows I could see the lights of San Francisco Bay spread out below us like a constellation. In a few minutes, Derek Hayes would look up from his humiliation and see me stepping out of a private jet, transformed from the abandoned wife he had left at Union Station into someone he had never imagined I could become. "Are you ready for your grand entrance?" Walter asked as we prepared for landing. I smoothed my designer dress, one of several outfits Walter had insisted on purchasing for this moment, and checked my reflection in the aircraft's mirror. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the heartbroken wife who had stood alone in Union Station 3 days earlier. This woman had power, purpose, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice was not just a concept, but a reality she had helped create. "I've never been more ready for anything in my entire life," I said. The Gulfstream touched down at San Francisco International Airport with the gentle precision that only comes with world-class aviation. As we taxied toward the private terminal, I could see Derek in the distance, standing beside a rideshare vehicle, looking haggard and defeated after his 8-hour bus journey from hell. He had no idea that his education in consequences was just beginning. The Gulfstream's door opened with a quiet hiss, and I stepped onto the tarmac at San Francisco International Airport, feeling like I was walking into the final act of a carefully choreographed performance. The cool night air carried the scent of jet fuel and fog, but there was something electric in the atmosphere, the crackling tension that comes before a long-awaited confrontation. Walter emerged behind me, adjusting his cufflinks with the casual confidence of a man who had just orchestrated the complete destruction of another human being's life in the span of a single day. The ground crew treated us with the deference reserved for serious wealth, their movements efficient and respectful as they handled our minimal luggage. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the private terminal, I could see Derek standing near the passenger pickup area, his shoulders hunched against the San Francisco chill. Even from a distance, his posture screamed defeat. The confident, charming man who had abandoned me at Union Station had been replaced by someone who looked lost and desperate. "He's been standing there for 20 minutes, Walter observed, consulting a text message from Patricia. Apparently, his rideshare driver canceled when Derek's credit card was declined for the 4th time tonight. He's been trying to borrow money from strangers to pay for a taxi. The image of Derek, who had once prided himself on his smooth professional demeanor, reduced to panhandling for cab fare, struck me as poetic justice. This was the man who had stolen our life savings to fund romantic weekends with another woman, now unable to afford basic transportation. Walter handed me the velvet ring box containing Derek's engagement ring for Stephanie, the 3-carat symbol of his betrayal that had cost more than I earned in 6 months. "Remember, timing is everything. We want maximum psychological impact." As we walked through the private terminal, I caught sight of my reflection in the polished marble walls. The woman looking back at me was transformed. The designer black dress Walter had insisted on purchasing fit perfectly, elegant without being flashy. The confidence in my posture was new, born from 3 days of discovering my own strength and watching justice unfold with mathematical precision. We emerged from the terminal into the passenger pickup area, and I saw the exact moment Derek noticed us. His face went through a series of expressions so rapid they were almost cartoonish. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally a dawning horror as his brain processed what he was seeing. Derek Hayes, who 12 hours earlier had been enjoying room service breakfast with his mistress while planning their future together, was staring at his estranged wife stepping out of a private jet worth more than his annual income. The cognitive dissonance was so severe, I could practically see his worldview crumbling in real time. Amanda? His voice cracked as he spoke my name, the single word carrying a universe of confusion and fear. What are you doing here? How did... You? Whose plane is that? I walked toward him with measured steps, savoring every second of his bewilderment. Walter remained slightly behind me, a silent presence that somehow made Derek even more nervous. My husband's eyes darted between us, trying to process a situation that made no sense within his understanding of our relationship dynamics. "Hello, Derek," I said calmly, stopping just close enough that he could see the expensive fabric of my dress, the professional styling of my hair, the quiet confidence that radiated from every aspect of my appearance. "Surprised to see me?" Derek's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. The man who had always had a ready charm for every situation, who could talk his way into any deal or out of any consequence, was completely speechless. His eyes kept returning to the Gulf Stream behind me, as if staring at it long enough would make it disappear and restore his sense of reality. "I don't understand," he finally managed. "How are you here? Where did you get the money for all this?" He gestured helplessly at the private jet, my transformation, the obvious wealth that surrounded me. Walter stepped forward then, his presence immediately commanding Derek's attention. "Good evening, Derek. I believe you've been trying to reach me about some urgent business matters." The color drained from Derek's face as recognition dawned. Walter Kane wasn't just his elderly client anymore. He was something far more dangerous, something Derek had catastrophically underestimated. "Mr. Kane," Derek stammered, his sales training kicking in automatically even as his world continued to collapse. "I can explain everything. There's been some kind of misunderstanding. My accounts were frozen, my credit cards canceled. Someone's made terrible accusations." Walter's smile was cold and precise. "Oh, there's no misunderstanding, Derek. You stole from me. You embezzled money, forged documents, and attempted to defraud additional victims. The FBI has been very thorough in documenting your crimes." Derek's legs seemed to give out slightly, and he steadied himself against a concrete pillar. "The FBI? That's impossible. I haven't done anything illegal. I've been helping clients, making investments." "You've been a common criminal," I said, quietly, my voice cutting through his denials like a blade. "And not even a competent one." I opened the velvet ring box and held it out so Derek could see the engagement ring he had purchased for Stephanie with stolen money. His eyes widened as he recognized it, understanding immediately that we knew everything about his secret life. "Stephanie asked me to return this to you," I continued, enjoying the way Derek flinched at his mistress's name. "She was quite upset when she learned that you're still married to me. Apparently, those divorce papers you showed her were forgeries. She had some very strong words about men who lie to vulnerable women." Derek reached for the ring box with shaking hands, his face cycling through emotions too complex to catalog. Shame, fear, anger, and a desperate kind of panic all warred for dominance in his expression. "Amanda, please," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the airport noise. "We can work this out. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go home and talk through everything." "Home?" I laughed, the sound carrying no warmth. "Derek, you don't have a home anymore. The FBI spent today cataloging evidence in our apartment. Your business partnership is dissolved. Your family won't take your calls. Your fiancé has abandoned you. And your wife, well, your wife has moved on to better things. Walter consulted, his watch with theatrical precision. Speaking of which, Derek, you might want to check your phone. I believe you have several missed calls from federal agents who are quite eager to discuss your recent activities with you. Derek fumbled for his phone with trembling fingers, the screen lighting up to reveal dozens of notifications. Missed? Calls from unknown numbers, text messages from former friends who had seen the evidence of his crimes, and email alerts from accounts that were being systematically frozen by court order. "This isn't real," Derek muttered, scrolling through the digital evidence of his complete social and professional destruction. "This can't be happening. People don't just lose everything in one day. They do when they're stupid enough to steal." "From Walter Kane," I replied. "Did you really think you were dealing with just another elderly victim? Did you imagine that someone who built a tech fortune would be too senile to notice your petty fraud?" Walter stepped closer to Derek, his presence somehow making the younger man seem even smaller and more pathetic. "You made two crucial mistakes, Derek. First, you underestimated me. Second, you underestimated your wife." Derek's eyes darted between us, finally beginning to understand that this wasn't a chance encounter. Walter and I standing together at San Francisco Airport, the private jet. The perfect timing of our arrival. It was all orchestrated. "You planned this," Derek said, his voice hollow with realization. "You've been working together." "We formed an alliance," Walter confirmed. "Two people you betrayed and abandoned, deciding that justice required a more creative approach than simply calling the police." Derek's phone rang, the shrill sound cutting through our conversation. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was Portland. Federal agents, most likely, calling to inform him of his impending arrest. He declined the call, but immediately another one came through. Then a text message that made his face go white as he read it. Then another call from a different Portland number. "They're closing in," I observed. "Your bus ride gave them plenty of time to prepare a proper welcome home celebration." Derek looked up from his phone, his expression desperate. "Amanda, please. I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. But we loved each other once. That has to count for something." The plea might have moved me a week ago, back when I still believed in the version of Derek that had never really existed. But standing there in my designer dress, having spent 3 days discovering my own strength and watching justice unfold, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "We never loved each other, Derek. You loved what I could provide. Stability, support, someone to manage your household while you pursued your real interests. And I loved an illusion, a character you performed when it was convenient." I stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the absolute certainty in my eyes. "But I want to thank you, Derek. Abandoning me at Union Station was the best thing you ever did for me. It freed me to discover who I really am when I'm not trying to save a marriage to a man who was never worth saving." Derek's phone buzzed with another call, this one from his mother. He declined it automatically, his focus entirely on our conversation, as if somehow the right words could undo the complete destruction of his life. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Walter answered, his tone carrying the finality of a judge delivering a sentence. "Now you face the consequences of your choices. The FBI is waiting for you in Portland with arrest warrants for embezzlement, fraud, and identity theft. Your business license has been permanently revoked. Your family has disowned you. Your girlfriend has abandoned you. And your wife has divorced you while securing every asset you thought you could steal." Derek stared at Walter, then at me, then at the private jet that represented wealth and power so far beyond his comprehension that he was still struggling to process it. "How much?" Derek asked suddenly. "How much is he paying you to do this to me?" The question was so fundamentally wrong, so completely missing the point, that I actually laughed. Derek, you still don't understand. Walter isn't paying me anything. We're partners, allies, two people you wronged who decided that justice required precision and creativity. But you're nobody, Derek said, desperation making him cruel. You're a freelance marketing consultant who can barely pay rent. You don't have this kind of power. Walter's expression darkened at Derek's words, and I saw a flash of the steel that had built his fortune. Your wife, Derek, is someone you never bothered to truly know. While you were playing small-time con games, she was demonstrating the intelligence, loyalty, and strategic thinking that make her exactly the kind of person I want as an ally. Derek's phone rang again, and this time he answered it automatically. The voice on the other end was professional and authoritative, clearly law enforcement. Derek's face went pale as he listened to whatever was being said. Yes, I understand, he said finally. I'll surrender myself when I return to Portland. He ended the call and looked at us with the hollow expression of someone who has finally accepted the scope of their defeat. Federal agents will be waiting at the bus station. They have warrants for my arrest on multiple felony charges. A fitting end to your romantic weekend, I observed. You came to San Francisco to celebrate your engagement to another woman. You're leaving in handcuffs to face federal prosecutors. Derek opened the ring box one more time, staring at the engagement ring that represented everything he had lost. The symbol of his betrayal, purchased with stolen money, rejected by the woman he had deceived just as thoroughly as he had deceived me. I'm sorry, he said, and for the first time, his voice carried what might have been genuine remorse. I'm sorry for all of it. I know you are, I replied. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry your life is ruined. You're sorry you're going to prison. But Derek, you're not sorry for what you did to me. You're not capable of that kind of empathy. Walter checked his watch again. Derek, your bus back to Portland leaves in 30 minutes. I suggest you don't. Miss it. The federal agents are expecting you. Derek nodded numbly, understanding that his choices were limited to surrendering himself in Portland or becoming a federal fugitive. Neither option offered any hope of escape from the consequences Walter and I had orchestrated. One last thing, I said, pulling out my phone and opening the camera app. Smile, Derek. I took a photo of him standing there in his wrinkled clothes, holding the engagement ring he would never give to anyone, with the private jet gleaming behind him in the background. The image perfectly captured the contrast between his fallen state and the power that had brought about his destruction. What's that for? Derek asked. Closure, I replied. And maybe a reminder to myself that justice, when properly executed, can be more satisfying than revenge. Derek turned and walked toward the bus departure area, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched him go, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and something that might have been pity. Not for the man he was, but for the man he could have been if he had made different choices. Walter and I walked back toward the private jet, where Captain Martinez was completing her post-flight checklist. Our business in San Francisco was complete, but the night was far from over. How do you feel? Walter asked as we settled back into the Gulfstream's luxury seating. Powerful, I said, surprising myself with the honesty of the answer. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time in my life, I feel like I have real power. Walter smiled with genuine warmth. Power properly used, Amanda. There's an important distinction. As we prepared for takeoff, I thought about Derek sitting on a Greyhound bus, beginning the 8-hour journey back to Portland and the federal agents who were waiting for him. By the time our private jet landed back in Oregon, Derek Hayes would be in custody, beginning a legal process that would likely end with years in federal prison. But more than that, he would be facing a life completely stripped of the illusions and deceptions that had sustained him. No more charm to rely on, no more victims to exploit, no more elaborate lies to maintain. just the raw consequences of his choices, delivered with the precision and creativity that Walter Kane had spent a lifetime perfecting. The Gulf Stream lifted off from San Francisco Bay, carrying us back toward Portland and whatever came next. Below us, the lights of the city sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet, beautiful and distant and completely under our control. Derek Hayes had learned that some people, when betrayed and abandoned, don't just survive. They thrive. And sometimes, they make sure that the person who wronged them never forgets the lesson. The Gulf Stream descended through the Oregon night sky toward Portland International Airport, the city lights below forming familiar patterns that felt both welcoming and transformed. Everything looked the same from 30,000 feet, but I knew that the world I was returning to was fundamentally different from the one I had left just hours earlier. Walter sat across from me in the aircraft's cream leather seating, reviewing messages on his tablet with the calm satisfaction of someone whose complex plan had executed flawlessly. The soft hum of the jet engines created a cocoon of luxury that made our recent confrontation with Derek feel almost dreamlike. Patricia confirms that Derek made his bus connection, Walter reported, not looking up from his screen. He should arrive in Portland around 6:30 this morning. Federal agents will be waiting. I nodded, feeling a strange emptiness where I expected vindication to be. The confrontation at San Francisco Airport had provided closure, but now that the adrenaline was fading, I found myself wondering what came next. For 3 days, my entire focus had been on bringing Derek to justice. Now that goal was essentially accomplished, leaving me face to face with the rest of my life. Having second thoughts? Walter asked, his perceptive blue eyes studying my expression. Not about Derek, I said carefully. He deserves everything that's coming to him. But I keep wondering who I am now that I'm not Derek's wife, not someone defined by trying to save a doomed marriage. Walter set aside his tablet and leaned forward with the focused attention he brought to important conversations. Amanda, you've spent the past 72 hours demonstrating exactly who you are. You're someone with the intelligence to recognize deception, the courage to seek justice, and the strength to rebuild from complete betrayal. That person existed before Derek, and she'll thrive long after he's nothing but an unpleasant memory. As we touched down in Portland, I felt the symbolic weight of returning home transformed. The woman who had stood abandoned at Union Station on Friday evening was gone forever, replaced by someone I was still discovering but already respected. The private terminal at PDX was quiet at this late hour, our footsteps echoing on polished floors as we walked toward the exit. Walter's town car was waiting, the same professional driver who had collected me from Union Station when my world was falling apart. "Where to, Mr. Kane?" she asked as we settled into the leather interior. "The Heathman Hotel," Walter replied. "Amanda will be staying in the penthouse suite tonight." I started to protest the expense, but Walter held up a hand. "Your apartment is still a federal crime scene, and even when it's released, you shouldn't have to return to a space filled with Derek's lies. Consider this the first night of your new life." The Heathman's penthouse suite was more luxurious than any space I had ever inhabited. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, and the furnishings spoke of understated elegance rather than flashy wealth. Walter had arranged for a complete wardrobe to be delivered, along with personal care items and everything I might need to begin rebuilding. "This is too much," I said, overwhelmed by the generosity. Walter's expression was serious. "Amanda, Derek stole more than money from you. He stole years of your life, your confidence, your sense of self-worth. Material comfort can't replace those things, but it can provide the foundation for rebuilding them." He handed me an envelope, thick with documents. "Charles has prepared everything you'll need. The divorce is being fast-tracked given Derek's criminal activities. The asset recovery will take longer, but preliminary estimates suggest you'll recover. Not just what Derek stole, but additional damages for emotional distress and fraud." I opened the envelope to find bank statements, legal papers, and what appeared to be investment documents. The numbers were staggering, representing not just recovered funds, but the kind of financial security I had never imagined possible. Walter? I can't accept this. It's too much. You're not accepting charity, Walter replied firmly. You're accepting justice. Derek's crimes cost me money, but they cost you years of your life. The financial settlement reflects that reality. He stood to leave, pausing at the door with an expression that mixed grandfatherly affection with entrepreneurial assessment. Amanda, you have two choices now. You can spend the rest of your life defined by what Derek did to you, or you can, 2. Use this experience as the foundation for something extraordinary. I hope you choose the latter. After Walter left, I stood at the penthouse windows looking out at Portland's skyline, trying to process the magnitude of change that had occurred in less than a week. 7 days ago, I had been a struggling marketing consultant married to a man who was systematically destroying our life together. Tonight, I was financially independent, legally free, and allied with one of the most powerful people I had ever met. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, I worried it might be Derek attempting some final manipulation, but the message was from Patricia, the private investigator. Subject in custody as of 6:47 a.m. Federal charges filed. Thought you'd want to know it's officially over. I set the phone aside and walked to the suite's bathroom, where a deep soaking tub was already filled with hot water and bath salts. As I sank into the warmth, I finally allowed myself to feel the full emotional impact of the past week. The relief was profound, but it was mixed with a kind of grief for the woman I had been before Derek's betrayal. That woman had been naive and trusting, willing to sacrifice her own interests for someone who saw her only as a resource to be exploited. She was gone forever, and while I didn't miss her vulnerability, I mourned the innocence that Derek had, stolen along with everything else. But underneath the grief was something stronger and more durable. A sense of my own power that had been dormant for years, awakened by necessity and refined by Walter's mentorship. I was no longer someone who things happened to. I was someone who made things happen. The next morning brought a steady stream of visitors to the penthouse suite. Charles Brennan arrived first, with updates on Derek's legal situation and the asset recovery process. He's being held without bail, Charles reported with professional satisfaction. The federal prosecutor considers him a flight risk, and given yesterday's events, that assessment seems accurate. His arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Charles explained that Derek's legal troubles were only beginning. The embezzlement charges carried potential sentences of up to 20 years in federal prison. The identity theft and fraud charges added additional decades. Even with plea negotiations and cooperation, Derek was looking at significant prison time. What about Stephanie? I asked. Will she face charges? Unlikely, Charles replied. The evidence suggests she was as much a victim of Derek's deception as you were. The FBI may want her testimony, but she won't be charged with any crimes. The second visitor was Marcus Webb, Derek's former business partner, who came to personally apologize for not recognizing Derek's criminal behavior sooner. I should have seen the signs, Marcus said, his face lined with genuine remorse. Derek was always pushing ethical boundaries, always looking for shortcuts. I convinced myself it was just aggressive salesmanship. Marcus brought documentation showing that Derek had been stealing from clients beyond just Walter. The total amount of his fraud exceeded $500,000, involving elderly clients who had trusted him with their financial futures. We're cooperating fully with the FBI, Marcus assured me. Everyone Derek victimized will be contacted and offered support for recovery. The Real Estate Commission is also implementing new oversight procedures to prevent this kind of abuse. The third visitor was unexpected. Gloria Hendricks, the elderly neighbor from my old apartment building, arrived with a casserole dish and a determined expression. "I saw the news about Derek on the morning show," she announced, settling herself in the penthouse's living room as if she belonged there. "Always knew that boy was trouble. Too smooth, too charming. Men like that are dangerous." Gloria's visit provided an interesting perspective on Derek's downfall. The neighborhood had apparently been buzzing with gossip about the FBI raid, Derek's arrest, and my mysterious disappearance. The general consensus was that Derek had gotten what he deserved, and that I was smart to escape when I did. "You're better off without him, dear," Gloria said with the authority of someone who had observed human nature for 8 decades. "Now you can find someone who deserves you." The idea of dating again seemed impossibly distant, but I appreciated Gloria's confidence in my future happiness. Her visit reminded me that my life had connections and meaning beyond Derek's betrayal. The afternoon brought a call from Walter, inviting me to dinner at his home. I found him in his kitchen, preparing what appeared to be a gourmet meal with the same precision he brought to everything else. "Cooking helps me think," he explained, offering me a glass of wine that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. "I've been considering your future, Amanda. You have choices to make." Over dinner, Walter outlined several possibilities for my next chapter. He could help me establish my own marketing consultancy with an impressive client base. I could pursue further education, with all expenses covered. Or I could consider joining his various business ventures in a consulting or partnership role. "The point is," Walter said, "you have options now. Real choices, not just the illusion of choice that Derek allowed you." We talked until well past midnight, covering everything from business philosophy to personal values, to the nature of justice and revenge. Walter's perspective on power and responsibility was sophisticated, shaped by decades of building companies and making decisions that affected thousands of people. "Power without purpose is just wealth," he said at one point. "But power with purpose can change the world." As the conversation wound down, Walter made an offer that surprised me in its scope and ambition. "I'm 73 years old, Amanda. I've built a successful career, accumulated significant wealth, and now I want to use both to make a difference. I'm establishing a foundation focused on supporting victims of financial fraud and domestic manipulation. I'd like you to consider running it." The proposal was staggering. Walter was offering me the opportunity to transform my experience with Derek into a mission that could help thousands of other victims. The foundation would provide legal support, financial assistance, and advocacy for people trapped in situations similar to my own marriage. "You understand the victim's perspective in a way that no academic or professional consultant ever could," Walter explained. "You've lived through the gradual erosion of self-worth, the financial manipulation, the social isolation. That experience, combined with your intelligence and newfound strength, makes you uniquely qualified to help others escape similar situations." I spent the next several days considering Walter's offer while dealing with the practical aspects of rebuilding my life. The FBI released my apartment, but Walter was right that returning to that space felt impossible. Instead, I hired a service to pack my personal belongings and donate everything else. The media attention around Derek's arrest was intense, but brief. Local news covered the story as a cautionary tale about financial fraud, while social media buzzed with speculation about his victims and accomplices. I avoided most of the coverage, focusing instead on the legal proceedings and my own healing process. Derek's arraignment was a somber affair. I attended as a victim witness, sitting in the courthouse gallery while Derek appeared in Orange Jail, clothing, shackled and flanked by federal marshals. The confident, charming man I had married was completely gone, replaced by someone who looked broken and defeated. When the judge read the charges, Derek's face remained expressionless, but I could see him absorbing the reality of his situation. Multiple felony counts, decades of potential prison time, and no realistic prospect of avoiding conviction given the overwhelming evidence against him. His attorney, a court-appointed public defender, entered a plea of not guilty, but the gesture felt perfunctory. Everyone in the courtroom knew Derek was guilty. The only question was how long he would spend in prison. As Derek was led away in shackles, he turned and looked directly at me for the first time since our confrontation in San Francisco. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that might have been acknowledgement. Not apology, exactly, but recognition that I had proven to be far more formidable than he had ever imagined. After the hearing, I met with federal prosecutors to discuss my victim impact statement and potential testimony at Derek's eventual sentencing. They were professional and sympathetic, treating me as a crucial witness rather than just another victim. Cases like this often hinge on the victim's willingness to speak truth to power, the lead prosecutor explained. Your courage in exposing Derek's crimes will help ensure justice for all his victims. That evening, I called Walter and accepted his offer to run the foundation. The decision felt right in a way that transcended rational analysis. Derek's betrayal had taught me about the vulnerability of isolation and the power of strategic alliances. Now I could use those lessons to help others avoid or escape similar situations. The Wayne Cain Foundation for Economic Justice was established with an endowment of $50 million and a mission to support victims of financial fraud, domestic economic abuse, and elder exploitation. Our first offices were located in downtown Portland, with plans to expand to other cities as our work developed. My first hire was Patricia, the private investigator who had helped document Derek's crimes. Her experience with surveillance and evidence gathering would be invaluable for helping other victims build cases against their abusers. Our second hire was Charles Brennan's daughter, a social worker specializing in domestic violence cases. Her understanding of the psychological aspects of abuse complemented Patricia's investigative skills and my own experience as a victim. Within 6 months, the foundation was receiving dozens of requests for help each week. Stories of elderly people being defrauded by family members, spouses discovering systematic financial betrayal, business partners stealing from their colleagues. Each case reminded me of my own experience while reinforcing the importance of our work. Derek's sentencing hearing took place on a gray February morning, almost exactly 1 year after he had abandoned me at Union Station. I delivered my victim impact statement to a packed courtroom, describing not just the financial damage Derek had caused, but the emotional and psychological trauma of discovering that my marriage had been built on lies. Derek Hayes didn't just steal money, I told the judge. He stole years of my life, my trust in other people, and my sense of self-worth. But in trying to destroy me, he inadvertently showed me my own strength. I want this court to know that while Derek's actions caused tremendous harm, they also led to my discovering a purpose and power I didn't know I possessed. Derek was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 8 years. The judge noted that while Derek had expressed remorse, his crimes showed a pattern of manipulation and exploitation that required significant punishment. As Derek was led away to begin his sentence, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and closure. Justice had been served, but more importantly, I had transformed from victim to advocate, using my experience to help others facing similar challenges. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I found Walter waiting by his town car, a smile of quiet pride on his weathered face. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like the end of one story and the beginning of another," I replied. 2 years later, the Wayne Cain Foundation had helped over 3,000 victims recover more than $40 million in stolen assets. We had testified before Congress about the need for stronger financial protections for vulnerable populations. I had written a book about recognizing and escaping economic abuse that became a bestseller and established me as a national expert on the subject. Derek remained in federal prison, where, according to reports from his attorney, he was working as a tutor in the prison's education program. Whether his apparent rehabilitation was genuine or just another performance was impossible to know, but it no longer mattered to my life. Standing in my corner office at the foundation, looking out at the Portland skyline that had witnessed my transformation from abandoned wife to powerful advocate, I thought about the woman who had stood alone in Union Station that rainy Friday evening. She couldn't have imagined the journey that began with Derek's cruel text message, but she had possessed the strength to survive it. The private jet that had carried me to confront Derek now served the foundation, transporting legal teams to help victims across the country. The wealth that Walter had used to orchestrate Derek's downfall now funded investigations, legal proceedings, and support services for people trapped in abusive situations. Power properly used, as Walter had taught me, could indeed change the world. My phone buzzed with a text from Walter, now in his mid-70s but still sharp and engaged with the Foundation's work. Board meeting at 4, new case from Seattle. That's going to interest you. I smiled, straightening my suit jacket and preparing for whatever challenge awaited. Derek Hayes had tried to reduce me to nothing, abandoning me at a train station while he pursued what he thought was a better life. Instead, he had freed me to discover who I really was and what I was truly capable of achieving. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. But sometimes the best revenge is living powerfully, using the strength gained from betrayal to ensure that others never have to face the same darkness alone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.